Good morning, officially. If we have not met before, hello, my name is Sharon Goodson, and I work for the Leech Tag Foundation and Impact Cubed. And this webinar this morning, Making Sense of Google Ads, is one of the many workshops, webinars that we've offered through the San Diego Gives program. And for those who might not know, San Diego Gives is a year-round nonprofit capacity building program that includes a lot of these types of programs, and then culminates with a day of online giving that was a few weeks ago. So we come up with many of the ideas for these sessions from Fundraising Fridays, which is a meeting that we have every Friday morning, 9 to 10 a.m. And that's online. We started doing that about 4 years ago, and it's just a time for people to ask questions about fundraising, share information, share funding opportunities, look for new staff or look for jobs. If you're interested in that, just and you're not already on the e-list for it, just put your name on or send me a note when we start the webinar, and I'm happy to add you. We'd love to have you join us. There's no cost for it at all. As you see, I'm recording this workshop. We will share out the link to the recording as well as a copy of the slide presentation either later this afternoon or tomorrow. I just say that just depending on what else is going on this afternoon. But you're welcome to it. You're welcome to share it. And anybody else who was registered for the webinar who's not joining us will also get the same information. So I am delighted to introduce you to Jessica King, who I've really enjoyed communicating with over these last weeks. Jessica is the business lead for an organization called Getting Attention, which also focuses a lot on nonprofit capacity building, particularly in this area of managing Google Ads. And I don't know about you, but I have periodically over the past years investigated grants for Google Ads, which seems pretty easy to get. But then once you get the Google Ad grant, then can be a little bit complicated and intimidating to manage. And that's what Jessica is going to walk through with us today. She's going to kind of show us all of the tips and tricks that go along with that. You will also have access to her contact information, and I'm also going to include a link in case you'd like to connect with her afterwards. That link will be on the follow-up note where you could schedule some time to connect. So that is available to you also. Jessica's background, though, includes time in both nonprofits and higher education, where she worked in communications and digital marketing. She also worked for an organization specializing in search engine optimization, which I think she's also going to talk a lot about, because I think that's one of the keys here. And she has a master's degree in communications from Virginia Tech. And as you see from the chat, she is joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being with us. I'm going to turn this over to you. I will still keep an eye on the chat. And what I think our plan is at this point is the formal presentation is about an hour. And then the last, we are scheduled for an hour and a half if you're able to join us for that amount of time. But after that hour, Jessica will happy to do as much Q&A as we all need. So that's kind of our plan. I guess if something burning comes up and you want to interject, just send a note in the chat and we will do that too. I want to make sure that everybody's needs are met. Okay, I'm going to put myself on mute and take it away, Jess.
All right. Sounds good. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you everybody for being here today. I'm really excited to talk to you about Google Ads and more broadly the Google Ad Grant. So I am going to go ahead and start us off with just like a quick overview of sort of how I'm going to move through this today. So One thing I usually like to do is assume that there's probably a few people here who already have the Google Ad Grant or who have at least done a little research into it, might be familiar with it. There's probably a lot of people here who might be hearing about it for the first time or would just benefit from a refresher. So I like to go through a quick overview of what that program is because it is a way to get started with Google Ads for free for your organization. I'll talk about how you apply, the eligibility criteria, etc. And then I'll move in the second half of the presentation here into some more tactical, practical tips. So, how do we pick keywords? How do we do that research so that we can run good ads? How do we make sure that our pages are set up in a way that Google's going to be able to understand and read? And then, how do we evaluate our ads metrics? What are sort of the things we should be focusing on, and what do sort of these core metrics mean? And then at the end, we'll leave time, of course, for questions. So, to kick us off, let's start with a overview of the Google Ad Grant. So the Ad Grant is a program from Google that provides up to $10,000 per month in what I kind of call Google Search Ad credits. So you can think of this almost like a gift card that you could spend in Google Ads on search ads. So this example that I've brought up here, I searched help stray animals, and as Sharon already mentioned, I'm in the Atlanta area, so I was served an ad for the Atlanta Humane Society, and you can see a few things about this. So first of all, they've highlighted in the headline text here, they have stray or lost animals. So right away, I know that this is connected to what I searched. And then they've got a bunch of links that they've highlighted below. They've got their locations and hours. They've got help end the suffering, donate today, adopt a pet. All of these might speak to what I'm interested in learning more about if I'm searching help stray animals. They even have this call us button, which I happened to search this on my computer, but if I had searched it on my mobile device, which we know more and more people are, then I could have just tapped right away and immediately been in touch with their team. So that is sort of what the Google Ad Grant program is designed to do. It's designed to let you get in front of potential supporters of your nonprofit who are searching for terms that are relevant to the work that you do in that moment that you are searching for them. So you can see it doesn't always end up at the tippy top of the page, but you can see in this instance, this ad did end up at the top of the page, even above the like organic search results. So that's sort of the why behind the program is you're getting there. People don't even have to scroll. They're already seeing you. They're already beginning to see your message. So people use the Google Ad Grant in a lot of different ways. And I know a lot of different organizations may have different things that they want to lean into. So I want to talk about some popular uses that we see with our clients when we help them with the Ad Grant. One of the most popular choices, one of the things that just about every single nonprofit that we work with does run is campaigns promoting donation opportunities, maybe running ads to your donation page, maybe if you have short term campaigns, things like that. I know that we are really swiftly approaching giving season, so this would be a very popular time for a lot of our organizations to begin trying to highlight ways that folks can support their organizations financially. Under this donation opportunities bucket, I also want to talk about two other kind of use cases that I think get overlooked a little bit, which are if you have programs that charge a fee to participate. So, as an example, using that animal shelter example, maybe it costs money to adopt a dog or a cat, but that money goes straight back to the organization. It's beneficial. You're allowed to use the ad grant to promote things that will drive revenue for your organization. Similarly, it is also possible if you have a merchandise shop or if you do sales of products in some way, you can also promote those via the Google Ad Grant. We do have a lot of organizations that do that as well. Donation opportunities are a popular one. I will say one caveat I'll give about the Google Ad Grant is that it is a free way to sort of get involved in the world of paid advertising, but it is not first and foremost a donation tool. So as you're kind of thinking through your options, as you're thinking through your just sort of choices with promoting your nonprofit, it's important to understand that what we're talking about here really is a marketing grant. So marketing is often tied to revenue outcomes, but marketing is not the same thing as sales. It doesn't replace, your development team going out and actually talking to donors, actually getting to know people and building that relationship. But what it can do is it can help kind of spread the word. And for folks who are already looking to potentially support organizations like yours, maybe they're looking at a term like donate to cancer research or something like that, you can kind of be in the mix with them. So that's donation opportunities. Upcoming events, very similar kind of thing here. You can promote both your mission focused events. So, again, just to use that animal shelter example, maybe you've got like a big dog walking day or like a puppy meet and greet, something like that, that's very mission focused that you're running. You can definitely promote things like that with the ad grant. The other thing you could promote would be fundraising events. So maybe you have like a community 5K that you do, or you have a golf event, things like that. You can also promote those. You can sell tickets, things like that with the ad grant. Volunteer recruitment is another popular one. I know a lot of nonprofits are powered by volunteers. Volunteers play a big role in what they do. So if you're looking for folks, getting on those volunteer terms can be another way. In a similar vein, but not quite the same thing, we also have some nonprofits who will choose to promote job openings in their organization. So maybe they are looking for a marketing specialist, or maybe they are looking for a interim executive director. We also have an organization who part of their advocacy is actually helping teachers get placed in jobs around the city of Memphis. So like they promote job openings that way. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can do there under this kind of category of like people recruitment. And the last thing that I think is kind of a catch-all category is growing awareness. And this is, I think, where the ad grant can be really nimble and can be a really cool tool to add to your organization's marketing toolkit. So the ad grant is basically designed to take a group of people who we already know based on what they're searching. They're interested in things that have to do with your nonprofit. But in an ideal world, we're maybe reaching people who don't already know about you, who maybe don't know about the work you're doing, etc. So when we think about some of these other use cases, we're going to be kind of working on getting this person more involved over time, right? So someone may visit the website first, and then maybe they decide to check out an event. Maybe they liked it, so maybe then they decide to volunteer. And maybe if they volunteered for a while, maybe they feel compelled to donate, et cetera. Like people go on these sort of journeys with your organization. But that growing awareness bucket can contain a lot of different things. So with our clients, some of the things that we'll do, for example, is like promote resources that they could download. So a lot of our human services, human interest, like veterans organizations, things like that, they've got downloadable resources where the organization captures that email and can then follow up with that person over time. And the person on the other side of the screen gets access to those resources. That's a great use for the ad grant. Other ones would be subscribing to newsletters. That's another great way to nurture folks over time. Calls from ads, things like that. Ways that people can engage with you that's maybe a smaller ask than, hey, can you give money? Things like that. So growing awareness is also a really, really great use of the Google Ad Grant and can be a great way to begin to engage with those audiences who maybe just starting to get familiar with your organization, but may not be in a place where they're ready to deeply engage yet. So the other thing I want to chat about as it relates to the ad grant is kind of what compliance looks like and how this program renews. Because the question we get a lot is like, you know, so this is a one-time thing. We apply one time and we get this sort of in perpetuity. The answer to that is yes. The ad grant does renew monthly. That $10,000 limit renews, resets monthly. But there are a couple of requirements in order to keep the grant. So to keep the grant, and we'll walk through what all of these terms mean in a little bit more detail in a second, but you have to get at least one conversion, which when I say conversion, what I mean is a meaningful action that somebody takes on your website. You get to pick what those are. So as an example, submitting a donation might be a conversion. Signing up for a newsletter might be a conversion. Clicking and watching a video all the way through. Maybe you've got a fundraising video. That could be a conversion. Visiting a key page could be a conversion, etc. You get the idea. So you have to get at least one conversion per month. You have to maintain at least a 5% click-through rate. So when I say click-through rate, what I mean is that at least 5% of the people who see your ad, who are shown your ad, have to click on it. And then there are some other more broad general best practices that Google asks to see. So they want to make sure that you're incorporating high quality keywords. They want to make sure that you're using the correct bid strategy, ad quality, account structure, all those things. This is a little bit more of a general tip because it's going to be very hard to do these other two things without also sort of following the best practices there. So really, if you are choosing high quality keywords, you've thought through how you're going to use your bid strategy, and we can talk about more about that in depth in a second. In general, these are going to be things you're going to have to do on the path to get these other ones. But month to month, we're looking for at least one conversion and at least a 5% click-through rate to keep the grant. So that is a little bit of the overview of the program. As a reminder, it is free from Google. Lots of folks choose to work with ad grant managers like getting attention, but it's not required. I do like to emphasize that because sometimes people do get a little bit confused about sort of what our role is. And I'll talk about that more at the very end. But let's talk about eligibility and sort of what the application process looks like. So who is eligible for the Google Ad Grant? Um, I'm going to assume most of the folks here are going to be in the US and are US based organizations. If you are not based in the US, but you happen to be joining us, do some research. Basically, you can just Google Ad Grant and then whatever country you're in. So Mexico, Canada, wherever you might be. And it is available in quite a lot of countries. So the requirements are going to be really similar, but might have some slight variations. So you'll just want to double check everything I'm saying here against the rules in your own country. But if you are in the US, you need to be registered as a 501c3. That's really important. So I will occasionally get folks who are like, we're a 501c4, we're a 501c6, we are a fiscal sponsored organization. Unfortunately, the requirements from Google are you have to be registered as a 501c3. The only other requirement, and I'll talk about these excluded categories in just a second, but the only other requirement if you are a 501c3 and not one of the excluded groups is have a high quality website. We'll talk in more depth about what that means in just a second. There are a couple of groups that are not eligible for the Google Ad Grant, unfortunately. So right now, schools and educational institutions are not eligible. Google does have a suite of products that are designed for schools, for universities, et cetera. It's under Google for Education, so you can search for that if that's of interest. The one exception here with schools or educational institutions is I know some universities have a sort of separate fundraising entity that is a 501c3. Those are eligible. And if you have more questions about that, we can talk about that in more detail, maybe on a private conversation or something like that, because it may not interest everybody. But that would be sort of the one exception if you find yourself in that category. Other types of organizations that aren't eligible, governmental entities and hospitals or healthcare organizations. And so these are all three, I would say, fairly broad categories. So there may be some of you on this call or some of you watching the recording who are going, okay, well, we're not really a hospital, but we do have some healthcare work that we do, but broadly we consider ourselves a nonprofit. We are more like that. I think if you are thinking through whether you might be eligible, I would kind of offer you two thoughts. One would be, in general, the application process is pretty simple. We're going to walk through what that looks like in a second. It usually takes like 10 minutes or less. So it's worth, if you think you might be eligible, it's worth giving it a shot because you can kind of unlock this cool program that you can use to promote your nonprofit. And these categories, this is sort of the second thought, these categories are a little bit hazy. I think that's on purpose, but my guess, this is just me kind of speaking as like professional in the field. This is not sort of official word from Google, but my best guess as to why these categories are excluded is that I think Google is trying to avoid situations where there is significant government funding. So you can imagine governmental entities, schools in K-12 or universities in K-12, they get significant funding from the government. I think it just creates kind of a conflict of interest for Google. I think that is my best guess as to why the program is this way. So if you're like, maybe, hey, we do tutoring for students, but we're not a school, are we eligible? Just go ahead and submit the application. The answer in many cases is going to be yes. So if that is if you find yourself in this situation where you're like, I can't say for sure that I am, but I also can't say for sure that I'm not applying. All right, so let's talk about how we even apply. So I first want to talk about what we should do to prep the application. So not quite the application process just yet, we will get there, but what do we need to check beforehand? There's really three things you want to confirm: SSL certification, organization information, and mission relevant unique content. These are Google's criteria for a high quality website. These are all a little bit vague, so I'm going to break down what all of these mean. But these are sort of officially from Google what they are looking for. So first is SSL certification. I think this is the one that on the surface looks the most intimidating, and in practice, I've actually never seen a application get denied because of the SSL certification. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer. And this is basically just assigned to Google that information that is transmitted in your website. So, for example, donor information, if somebody chooses to make an online donation, is going to be managed securely. I think one thing that's helpful as you're thinking about the ad grant, as you're thinking through the rules, the requirements, et cetera, is to kind of put yourself in the mind of Google as a company and be thinking about like, why might they want this? So with the SSL certification, if Google is going to be putting your website up in front of people, you're going to be running ads and saying, hey, go here, maybe running ads to your donation page, people are clicking on it. Google does not want to, in 6 months, be on the other end of a data breach that they're somehow being held responsible for because the nonprofit's website wasn't secured, right? So that is sort of the thought process here. They want to know that if they're promoting something, that information is going to be managed securely. The great news about this is it's very easy to check, and most websites that I've seen have this kind of built in by default. So What you're going to do, if you're using Chrome, it's really, really easy. All you'll do is up at the address bar, you can see I did this on the Getting Attention website. There's like a image that it almost looks like two lollipops on its side. You're going to click on that, and there's going to be something that says connection is secure. If you see that, you can even click on it and it'll give you a little more information. It says connection is secure, certificate is valid. This is what we're looking for. If you see that, great job. This used to look like just a little lock icon, so you might be used to seeing that as well. That would be another way you can know. If your SSL certification is not valid, if it does not say connection is secure, I would recommend reaching out to whoever manages your website, whoever built your website. Like I said, probably 95% of the websites I see meet this threshold, so I really wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you notice this, this is something that your organization should work on in part because secure transmission of information is really important, especially if you have any sort of online donation opportunities. So something I would prioritize. But for most of you, this is not going to be a problem. You're going to check it. You're going to go, great, we've got it. So we will move on to the next easiest category, which is organization information. This is basically making sure that your website has enough to let new users learn more about who you are. So good places to start with this, your mission and vision statement. Doesn't have to be, a 10-page volume of like the history of your organization. It can be a couple of sentences. So for example, I pulled an example from one of our clients. They say, we are a not for profit dedicated to educating and raising awareness about adolescent depression, encouraging good mental health, and breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health issues. Great. Couple of sentences, lets you know who they are, what they're about. Your contact information would also be some important information to have on your website. So if folks want to reach out to you, what is a good email address to do that? Are there phone number? Is there a phone number, maybe phone numbers plural, that they could reach out to? If you have a physical address, can people come and visit you in person? Can people come meet your staff? Things like that. Your EIN is an optional, but in my opinion, nice to have. So you can see one of our nonprofits again have the EIN listed in the footer. So anywhere folks go, one of the things that I think is beneficial about having the EIN on your website is that it helps build trust that you are actually a properly registered not-for-profit organization. People know if they make a donation that they are actually making a donation to a real organization who are who they say they are. There are a lot of scammy sites out there that will kind of pretend to be nonprofits. So that is the reason I recommend it. But it is truly optional. I've seen organizations include it. I've seen organizations not include it. It's not a deal breaker. I just think it's nice to have. So that is organization information. So we've done SSL certification, we've done organization information. The last one is going to be mission relevant content. And we're going to dive even deeper into this in just a second. But the key to getting good results with the Google Ad Grant is having content that is up to date, that is relevant to your mission, and that's relevant to what people are searching for. So I've chosen an example here that I think is a strong example. This is from one of our clients, Claire's Place. And they are an organization who helps raise money for folks with cystic fibrosis. So they have a page, for example, called What Does It Mean to Have CF? And they've got some information about what the experience of having cystic fibrosis is like. They've got some quick data points down here about how much it costs for folks who have CF, how many hours a day they spend doing treatments, how long they go to the hospital, et cetera. So this is the type of stuff that if you were searching for cystic fibrosis and maybe you didn't know a lot about it, you could learn a lot about it by looking at this page, and that might help begin this journey of you feeling kind of compelled to get involved and to do something about it. And if you did already know about it, and let's say you landed on this page, but you knew you were looking to donate, we've got this donate button highlighted up in the corner. So we're going to talk about how we can signal to Google what pages are about, but this is the sort of stuff that Google is looking for. I think the only other point I want to make about mission relevant content is I sometimes see organizations get a little intimidated by this requirement because I think it can be a little daunting, especially if you're a little bit newer, maybe haven't had a chance to build out a ton of stuff on your website. I've seen some fairly bare bones websites get approved for the Google Ad Grant. So it's not usually a barrier to acquiring the grant, but one of the things as you're thinking through your sort of grant strategy would be, okay, how do we make sure that we have enough pages that we can run the types of ads we want to run, that people can find the information that they're looking for, and that they can kind of continue to deepen their involvement with our organization in that way. All right. So now that we've talked about how to prep, I'm going to walk you through the application process. It's really simple. It takes less than 10 minutes. So first thing, I want to make a quick note about the email. The email that you use, ideally, if you have like your name at yourorganization.org, That's going to be the best email to use for your application process. The reason being, Google wants somebody who is sort of authorized on behalf of the organization to be doing this application. So if you're using an organizational email, that's a clue to Google that you probably are somebody who works there. You probably are authorized to make this to do this application. If you don't have one, that's okay. That's not the end of the world. You can use like a Gmail or a Yahoo, whatever you have, but the process may just you may have to answer additional questions or provide additional documentation. So just a heads up there. But what we're going to do is we are going to search for Google for Nonprofits. That is the sort of core program that Google has, and they offer a lot of different products in there. So when you apply for Google for Nonprofits, not only do you get access to the Google Ad Grant, you get access to Google's suite of products. So like Google Docs, Gmail, blah, blah, blah. You get those, you get access to YouTube for nonprofits, you get access to Google Earth, etc. So step one is applying for Google for Nonprofits. When you submit that application, it will get sent to their verification partner, which is called Percent. Percent basically acts as sort of like a background checker for Google. They basically look, they make sure you are who you say you are, they make sure that your organization is properly registered, all that good stuff. So if you are, this would be one tip for you. If you are one of those organizations that maybe falls into that hazy, like we might be eligible, we might not, I'm not really sure, it's possible to go to Percent, check their database, claim your nonprofit, sort of get your ducks in a row with them first, and then apply for Google for Nonprofits. In my experience, that can be one way. If you think you might get confused for, let's say, a school, but you're not actually a school, that can be a good way to sort of clear all that up before you apply for Google for Nonprofits. So that is the first step. If you're like, maybe you're listening and you're like, well, we're an animal shelter, like pretty clear, pretty cut and dry. We're definitely eligible. You don't have to go to Percent. I would probably just start with Google for Nonprofits because it's going to be a little more streamlined that way. And generally speaking, usually you can expect a reply in 1 to 3 days. I have seen this process take longer. It kind of just depends on how long or on how many applications Google is processing at any given moment. I've seen this last up to 2 weeks, but typically 1 to 3 business days is going to be pretty normal there. Once you get your Google for Nonprofits application cleared, you get the confirmation. They say, "Yep, you're in." All you're going to do is log in. There will be that list of products that I just mentioned, and you will look for the ads logo. It looks like this, and there will be a little blue button that says Activate Products. It used to be a little bit more of a prolonged process. You used to have to fill out this big survey. Now you are shown a video, and there's a little checkbox that says, I watched the video, and you submit that and you hit send. And then in 1 to 3 days, they should give you a reply about the ad grant status. So usually, in my experience, most organizations do get approved for the ad grant on their first go. If you do not get approved for the ad grant, if you do get Google for Nonprofits, but you don't get the ad grant, usually in my experience, they will give you some feedback on your website. Usually website quality is going to be the main reason that people don't get approved. And usually Google will give you some feedback. So they might say the website didn't load fast enough, or they might say, we couldn't find enough content, like we couldn't understand what your website was about, etc. If you're ever unclear on the feedback that Google gives you can actually just respond to Google support and they will sometimes give you a little bit more clarification. The other thing is that this application is not like a one strike, you're out type of thing. So let's say you apply, let's say you get some feedback from Google. They say, hey, your website's kind of slow to load. We need you to speed this up. You can, let's say, maybe you make the images on your website a little less, the files smaller, you make them less big, right? So your website loads faster. You just resubmit that application and then they'll check again. So it is not, I don't want anyone on this call to be intimidated by this application. Most of the time, it is pretty straightforward. Most of the time, it is pretty streamlined. It's not usually too bad. So that's why I want to encourage any of you who are interested in this, it's okay to go ahead and take a swing. The other thing about just the Google Ad Grant generally is if you have had the ad grant, let's say maybe you didn't have a lot of folks on your marketing team at the time, it kind of fell by the wayside, maybe it got deactivated. It's also possible to get these reactivated in the future. So as long as you didn't do something egregious, like you weren't advertising something illegal or something like that, you can get these back up online. So again, if you're sitting here and you're like, I think we actually had that years ago and I think it got deactivated, usually a quick email to Google support can help get that back online. They'll just ask for you to run some campaigns that sort of meet their requirements, and then you're usually good to go. All right. So we've talked about what the program is, we've talked about who's eligible, we've talked about how to prep your website and how to apply. Let's move on to keywords and optimizing landing pages. So this is going to be more of the practical and tactical stuff for those of you who maybe already have the ad grant or who are maybe thinking about regular paid ads. These are going to work in very, very similar ways, at least for search ads. So the first thing I want to talk about is how Google reads a page, because I think this is really, really core to understanding how search ads work. So Google is not like humans. Google does not read a page like visually the way that humans do. I think probably all of you would be like, yeah, duh. But it's important to really, really keep that in your brain because we're going to take a look at more depth on like how web pages are built so that we can make sure that it's very Google friendly. So instead of looking at the page visually, like humans do, it has a few on page signals that it uses to understand what a page is about. So on page signals include things like headings, which are usually coded as H1, H2, H3, etc. If you've ever been in your website's builder, you've probably seen these. These do have actual meaning. They're not just sort of like decorative elements, which is actually what I thought before I started working in the world of SEO and of advertising. They are meaningful criteria for Google. Text, really obvious one. This is usually coded as a paragraph. So basically, what text is on your page tells Google what the page is about. Alt text, which is like if you have an image and you were to hover over it, and I'll show you an example in just a second. That's kind of the explanatory bit. Google can't really see images reliably yet. My hypothesis is that that is coming. I think that AI and image recognition has come a really long way, so I think that's probably in the future going to be more of a thing. But today, Google's not great at reading images. And then links and anchor text also helps Google understand how concepts relate to each other. But so I've kind of explained all this. I've been like, we really need to spoon feed this to Google. Google is also smart. It is learning all the time. It understands keywords. It understands close variations on that keyword. So what I don't want is I don't want everyone here to come away and be like, okay, now we got to make this entire website like built for a robot and like completely forget the human user because Google is really striving to help its robot understand sites more and more similarly to how a human would understand it so that people can find the best results on search. So we're going to keep that in mind as well. So I want to show you an example. I've pulled this off of the Getting Attention site. We also have this article linked in our resources tab. So if you want to also look through the application process in more depth, we also have this. But this is kind of how humans see a page, right? So we're looking at this. We can see visually, we have the picture here, we've got the text here, we've got a call to action with a link here. And I'll just let you know that the target keyword that we are trying to get folks to arrive at is apply for Google Grants, right? So as a human, you may notice that apply for Google Grants is right here, it's right here, but it may not stand out to you a lot. So that is kind of how humans see a page. Here are the different things that Google is looking at when it reads a web page. So first is alt text, like I just talked to you about. So I know this is kind of small, so I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. But it says, learn all about how to apply for Google Grants in this guide. So right off the bat, Google says, okay, here's some alt text for this image. Google doesn't know what this says, but it does know what this says. The heading is also important. So this is coded as an H1, how to apply for Google Grants, get approved in 4 easy steps. We've got the text that's actually on the page. So there's a few different places where it says like after completing the Google grant application process. This is an example of what I mean when I say that Google understands variations. So that target keyword is apply for Google Grants, but someone might also be searching Google grant application process. Google's going to understand that those two things are synonyms. Similarly down here, we've got another link. The link has the keyword in it as well. Again, this next page, how do I get a Google grant? That's going to be really similar to this concept of apply for Google grants. So again, close variations, right? And it's also going to be a little bit more natural for your readers. And then the last one, this is a call to action. So this is one I wanted to call out because this is something that I think is really common on nonprofit sites that is not immediately able to be read by Google. You'll notice that this is a big image. It's an image with a link in it, essentially. So Google can't really read this, but what it does do is a couple of things. One, it signals a next step to your users. So like this says need help applying for Google Grants. We can assume that somebody who is searching for that might be interested in help. But based on their search intent, it gives them a next action. And the types of actions that people take on your website also kind of inform Google about what your site is about, what pages and what things are linked, tell Google a little bit more about what concepts relate to each other, and it can help your website kind of appear better in search results. So that's an important one. Not core to how Google understands the page per se, but the follow-on effects of how people behave on your website also have impacts there. So once we kind of understand how Google even finds the keywords on your site, we're going to move into this keyword research process. And so there are a couple of tools that you can use for this job. So what we're going to do is basically, once we have an idea of like, okay, is our page built right? Now we're going to say, what types of keywords do we even want to select for this? One option, if you have the ad grant already, that is free to you, is Keyword Planner. This is a great one. If you're like, I want the super simple version, how do I streamline this? This would be the one that I would recommend using. So the cool thing about Keyword Planner is, first of all, it's free. It's under Google Ads, and it uses Google's own data. So, when Google tells you, hey, this many people per month are searching for this term, you can trust that that information is straight from Google. It is presumably pretty reliable. It also will give you insights about your own site. So when you go into Keyword Planner, you can just enter your own URL and it'll start to show you how Google is already reading your site, what keywords it associates with your site. You may look at that keyword list and you may be like, rock on. Google already knows a lot about our website. In that case, it's going to be pretty easy to run ads and have and show up on the keywords you want to show up on because Google already understands that that's relevant, right? You might look at that list of keywords. You might go, this really has nothing to do with our website, in which case it might be worth taking a step or two back, looking at how your landing pages are built and sort of digging into the guts of the website and saying, okay, do our H1s feature keywords that are relevant to our site? Do our H2s? Is the text relevant? Are the links relevant? Are we sending links to all kinds of random places? These are sort of where your website and your ads overlap. Other tools you could use for the job. So Google's got a robust one. If you just need a one-stop shop, that's what I would recommend. But there are third-party tools. So Moz is good for SEO, not so much for paid advertising. For paid ads, like the Ad Grant, SEMrush, or SpyFu are going to be where you want to go. And they have some limited free tiers. I would not recommend anybody on this call go out and immediately purchase a SEMrush subscription or a SpyFu subscription. That's probably going to be a little intense for what you need at this point. But using some of the limited free stuff, you can start to search for competitors. And I know sometimes nonprofits don't think of themselves as having competitors, but what I mean by this is sort of organizations who might be showing up on similar keywords as what you want to show up for. You can start to see, okay, what are they doing? What do their pages look like? What sorts of ads, if they're running ads, what sorts of ads are they running? How are they building the text, etc. One note, I don't think this is a like disqualifier or even a bad thing about third-party tools, but it is just worth keeping in mind is that they usually do use their own data. So the strength or the quality of the information that you're going to get for research is going to be a little dependent on the quality of that tool's database. So my personal leaning, I'm a fan of SEMrush personally. If you talk to 100 marketers, you would probably get 100 different opinions on which tool is the best. So that is just my leaning. But just know that like when SEMrush gives you data, it is SEMrush's best guess based on what it can observe from Google searches. Google is going to have the sort of more definitive data about keywords at any given moment. All right. So we've talked about the tools to do keyword research. Now I want to talk a little bit about what you should be evaluating when you are thinking about what keywords you might want to run ads to. First, this one's pretty easy, volume. So how many people are searching for whatever term per month? So if I was an animal shelter and I wanted to advertise on adopt a dog, we can guess that probably a lot of people are searching that per month. That's going to be a relatively high volume keyword. If I were to say like adopt a capybara, probably not very many people searching for that. That one's probably going to be a little less common. So looking at how many people are searching for your keyword. Competition is an important one for advertising. Basically, a reflection of how many other organizations or businesses or what have you, how many other entities are trying to show up on that keyword at the same time. Generally speaking, volume and competition are going to rise together and fall together. So usually, and this makes sense, right? If you're like, hey, there's hundreds of thousands of people searching this term every month, probably a bunch of other organizations have had the same thought and have said, hey, that sounds like a good keyword for us to show up on. So just something to be aware of. Cost is not an easy lever to pull in the Google Ad Grant because of one of the restrictions that I mentioned a little bit earlier. There is a restriction against, I mentioned this in the bid strategy section, so this is kind of where we're going to talk about it. There is a restriction against setting your own bid strategy higher than like $2 per click. So we can kind of break down what that means a little bit more in the Q&A, but I think for simplicity's sake, the most important thing to know here is that in order to be effective in the ad grant, you're going to use a strategy called maximize conversions. What that does is it lets Google's machine learning algorithm pick the cost that it is willing to assign to a keyword. So for those of you here, just understand cost is not, for the most part, a lever that you have a ton of control over pulling. Um, but the reason it's relevant in this research context is that the lower the cost for the keyword, generally, the easier it's going to be for you to show up on it. The higher the cost, that's going to be a little bit more of a challenging bar for you to show up on. When I say low cost, what I mean, an example of like a low cost keyword might be somewhere between like 10 cents and $1.50 per click. That's usually a fairly affordable keyword. Versus there are some keywords that might cost like $100 per click. Again, we're playing with Google's money the whole time. So in terms of cost to you, either one is zero. But in terms of your success showing up on these keywords, usually lower cost is going to be easier. Cost, as you might imagine, if you're putting yourself in Google's shoes, is very related to volume and competition. So generally speaking, the higher the volume, the higher the competition, the higher the cost because Google gets to charge more and say, you want to show up on this keyword? Pay me more. If we were using a regular paid ads account, I think that would be super logical. I think when we're working with Google's money, it can sometimes get a little hazy from our perspective on how that relates, but we got to remember at the end of the day, Google is a money making machine. So Google wants to see money in the door. That's kind of how cost fits in. Relevance is actually what we were just talking about earlier. So, how connected is the content on your page and the content on your website to the keyword you are trying to show up on? So, like as an example, if I'm an animal shelter and I've got a page to adopt a dog, I've got a page to adopt a kitten, I've got a page for maybe like small animals, and I decide for some reason that I want to show up on a search for like children's field trip opportunities. Maybe that's related. Maybe you have a program with your local schools where the kids can come on a field trip. But Google's going to see that as a bit of a stretch. So you're going to have a much easier time showing up on keywords that are on your site, that are related to what you do, that are relevant to what Google kind of considers to be related concepts, than if you try to get crazy, try to pull it out and be like, hey, here's this other random thing that is a little more unusual. So relevance is important to keep in mind because there's always going to be this tension in search between your brand and how your organization likes to talk about things and how people are searching for your issues, how people understand the concepts that you might be grappling with day to day. So, those sorts of things are important to kind of be holding in your mind as you're doing your keyword research. All right. So, I've talked a little bit about keyword research. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how search ads work, like how Google decides how to show an ad in the first place, because I think this is going to help you be a bit more successful in your advertising. So, when Google has an opportunity to show an ad, basically there's like an ad spot open on a search. So I'm Jessica. I'm sitting at my computer and I've searched, adoptable dogs near me, right? Google say Google says, okay, great. There's an opportunity for me to show an ad, and it's going to go through a lightning fast process called the Google Ads auction. Google is weighing those different factors that we were talking about before. So it's weighing the competitiveness of the keyword, basically how many people are trying to get in on this action. It's going to weigh the bid. If we're using our maximize conversions bid strategy, then the machine learning is already going to be throwing your best bid into the equation. So don't worry about that one for now. It's going to be looking at ad quality. So how related is the ad that you are trying to run to what Google thinks the user is looking for? And landing page quality, same deal. How relevant is the landing page that you are offering to what the user is trying to find? My recommendation. So in a Google Ad Grant account, the easiest factors for you to control are going to be your ad quality and your landing page quality. My recommendation would be if you are looking at these two things and you're like, I think we've put together a pretty great ad, and I think we've put together a pretty great landing page, but I don't really know how to gauge this against other people. I would go ahead and pull up an incognito window. You want to use incognito because Google is also catering to you as a user. You want to make sure your own preferences, your own search history isn't being involved. We're going to pull up that incognito window, search whatever keyword you're trying to show up on. If you're trying to show up on adoptable dogs near me, search that in an incognito window, see what Google offers you, because that is going to be who Google has already determined is sort of the best of the best. It likes to show them higher up. And then as you scroll further down, you're going to see, kind of a in Google's mind, decrease in quality on the way down. That does not always mean really anything about the organization on the other side. It kind of speaks more to their web optimization and their web presence. But that would be my recommendation there is like see what Google has picked and then try and emulate that for your organization. Be looking at, am I promoting the right type of page? maybe adoptable dogs near me. Maybe I was promoting my donation page that's like, donate to us because we help adoptable dogs find homes. But maybe all of my competitors have a page that's like, this is Fluffy, and like get to know Fluffy, and has a clickable link right to the adoption form right there. That's the sort of thing you're looking for. What types of pages are they showing? What do those pages look like? What kind of content is on them? And how do I build that backwards for my organization? Um, so one example that I wanted to show, and I think I might actually dive into this in more detail. Yep, I do. Okay. We'll talk about Glacier National Park in just a second, but that is kind of how search ads work. The other question that I started to dive into a little bit is like, how do we pick the right landing page for our ads? The best landing pages for your campaigns are going to be landing pages that feature the keyword or keywords, plural, that you're trying to appear on. They're going to have a clear call to action that's going to be connected to the search intent. So if you're saying like donate, and maybe it's like donate to animal shelter, then the donate button should say donate and things like that. I know this might sound a little repetitive or might sound a little obvious, but I have had to sort of make these observations before. You also want to make sure you have a good user experience, like loading quickly, having clear navigation, etc. This is a little bit of a controversial point. There's a question in advertising of like, do you need a brand new landing page for every single campaign, or can you use ones that already exist? At Getting Attention, we will typically use landing pages that already exist for our clients. Reason being, they have some history with Google already. Google already has an understanding of this page. Usually that's going to help us get results a little more quickly compared to if we created a brand new landing page for every single campaign. Usually what that would do is Google would just have to learn about the page first. Google's not going to show something that it's not sure about. So it has to learn first, then it'll show it. So we just speed up that process a little bit. But Google Keyword Planner, or there's another free tool called Google Search Console, it's more for the organic side, can help you get an idea of what keywords Google recognizes on the page. So we're going to break this down in a real example. We're going to kind of pull all this together. So I searched donate to Glacier National Park, and I was served an ad for Glacier National Park Conservancy, which is a client that we work with. So first of all, we're going to see this in big. We're going to break this down. So there's kind of two chunks of this keyword, right? There's donate, that's that verb. It gives you an idea of what the intent of the person is. Then there's this Glacier National Park component. So we're going to focus on the donate portion first. So there's kind of three things in this big ad that I want to point out. We've got Glacier National Park, like all proceeds support the park. We've got this text that says support Glacier National Park today by becoming a donor. All donations are tax deductible. So words like support, words like donor, words like donation, all of these are very relevant to this search that was in the term of donate. And the good news is if I had searched donation to Glacier National Park, there's a great chance I would show up, or the ad would show up as well, because we've got these close variations, right? When I click on that, I land immediately on their giving page. It says give to Glacier. We've got this form. It's easy to use. So if I am a user and I already know I want to donate to Glacier National Park, this is a great way for me to do so. That user intent is satisfied immediately. We've also got a couple of other links here, though, in the kind of lower site links here. We've got clearance. This goes to that shop thing I was mentioning earlier. So they sell some merchandise, hats, sweaters, things like that. And so people could, maybe they don't want to donate money. Maybe they don't want to just give $50. Maybe they want some swag, maybe they want a water bottle that says Glacier National Park on it. They could do that here. They could support the park through purchase. Same thing here with backcountry hiking maps. The other cool thing about this one is this relates really closely to what, types of activities people might want to do while they are in Glacier National Park. So most links are going to lead to pages of interest, and they're going to drive revenue for the organization, which is sort of the mutual benefit of trying to get on a search like this. But there's also this Glacier National Park component where we want to be able to also pick up people who are searching for this ad. So you'll see that there's like park activities. It'll say park activities in Glacier National Park. These links are designed to capture these awareness audiences who may not be ready to donate yet, but you'll see that call to action to donate is still available. It's in bright orange at the top of the page, any page on the website, right? We want to make sure that we can still get those folks, because those folks may become valuable over time. So Glacier is an organization, actually, they've been around for a long time. They understand that like a email address has like a financial of value to them. So I think they put it at like 10 or 15 cents per email address, right? So there's value not only in, yes, somebody completed a donation, yes, somebody bought a t-shirt, but also somebody signed up and said they wanted to hear more. Even if they haven't donated today, we know with pretty good likelihood that person may donate in the future. So we can guess that an email is worth about this much to us. So that's kind of an example of what that looks like in practice. I want to wrap up here by talking about ads metrics. So we have really gone on a journey today, right? We have understood what the program is about. We have understood who's eligible and how to apply. We have really dived into kind of the nitty-gritty of like, how do we even begin sussing out what needs to happen on our website, what types of keywords, how do we do keyword research, all that sort of stuff. Now I want to go to, you've been running your ads for a little while, you're beginning to get results in. What are the metrics you should be looking at? And like, how do you kind of understand what's going on here? So, in my opinion, and again, you'll talk to different marketers, you may get different perspectives on this. So, I would always recommend, of course, consulting different sources as you're figuring out your strategy. But in my opinion, there are four key ad metrics that you're going to want to keep an eye on. The first one is going to be click through rate. So, this is what we talked about before. The reason this is important is twofold. One, you need a 5% click through rate in order to keep the grant. So, at a bare minimum, you need to be getting 5%. But more broadly, what a click through rate can show you is, are you getting in front of an engaged audience? What is very likely to happen in your ad grant account is that you're going to have some campaigns that might have really high click through rates. So if you run, let's say, a branded campaign where you're trying to capture searches for your name, there's good reasons to do that. We can talk about that more in the Q&A if anyone's curious. But that one is going to have a pretty high click through rate because, like, if I search getting attention and I'm served an ad for getting attention and I'm lazy, I'm just clicking right on the ad, right? So that click through rate is going to be pretty high. If you are running a campaign maybe for a relatively new area for you, maybe people just don't know your organization for that topic already, right? That click-through rate might be significantly lower. So what we're looking for is like the average and like how engaged is that audience. Gives you an idea of sort of how much people associate that topic with you. Clicks, exactly what it sounds like. How many clicks did you get? Generally speaking, we want this number to go up. Generally speaking, we want click-through rate to go up. For all of these, though, these numbers don't exist in isolation. They really should be understood together as part of a complete picture and in the context of whatever type of strategy you're running right now. So clicks and click-through rate is a good example where maybe you are showing up on a lot of branded ads, but you're not showing up on a ton of other ads. You may, especially if you are a smaller organization, there may just not be a ton of people searching on you. So, maybe you've got 200 searches per month for your brand name and you're getting a click-through rate of like 80%. Um, but that's not a very big pool. So you might be looking to expand, grow that number of clicks, and you might be looking actually for that CTR to go down. Because ideally, if you're showing up on different types of searches, you're going to be getting more clicks, and then that rate is a fraction. So as you get more clicks, that rate is going to go down, but that's a good thing in this hypothetical example I've dreamed up. Conversions is an important one. So this is uh, how many people took that meaningful action that you chose on your website. My recommendations for conversions, one would be to have a variety of types of conversions. So occasionally we'll get nonprofits who are like, the only thing we care about is donations, and that's the only one we want to set up. That's not a great technique for a couple of reasons. One, the pool of folks who make a donation may be smaller than the pool of total folks who might want to engage with your organization in some other capacity. So by having multiple conversion actions, you can get people to you can kind of cast a wider net, right? You can search or you can find people who are searching for topics. You can get them kind of in your wheelhouse, and that's wise for that reason. Another thing is sometimes interest in concepts, interest in different cause areas might have some seasonality to it. So Glacier that I just showed you, their busy period, as you might imagine, is kind of in the summer, so April through roughly October. And then in the winter, you're not really allowed to go in Glacier. It's very snowy. It can be kind of risky for hikers, things like that. So they have a little bit of a slower period. I'm sure those of you who are maybe involved in veterans causes could tell you that November is going to be a really busy time for veterans because they got Veterans Day, kind of bringing attention to it, but that maybe people aren't thinking about it as much in the spring. Anybody who works in schools could say the same thing. So by having a variety of conversion actions that aren't just donations, but maybe are like signing up for an email list, downloading a resource, things like that, you can capture more of the ways people might be engaging, even if donating isn't on their mind in that particular moment. The last thing that I would keep an eye on is your total ad spend. So the cool thing about the ad grant is, again, we've got up to $10,000. It is Google's money, so to a certain extent, it's the least important of these four metrics in my mind. But it's an easy one to benchmark, and it's one that a lot of organizations care about. What I think is important to know about ad spend is two things. So, your ad spend is determined by the cost of the keyword, we just showed that, times the number of clicks you got at that cost. That cost is sort of a moving target because of that ad auction thing that I told you about. So, to give you an example, let's take this exact same keyword. It's like adopt a dog. Someone's probably searching for that, let's say on like a Saturday, maybe at noon, right? Like that's a good time to go to a animal shelter. Someone is probably not searching for that at like 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. Maybe they are, but probably most people are not. And so showing an ad at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, probably going to be a lot cheaper than showing it in like kind of the prime time. And that's just one example of the ways in which these things can fluctuate. So your total ad spend is going to change based on your clicks and the cost that's associated with each click. It may also change based on what conversions you prioritize. So, for example, to start off an ad grant, just to get it spending, get Google initially familiar with your audience, you may choose lots of really broad conversion goals. You may say, hey, we're going to count anybody who signs up for an email, anybody who hangs on the site for 10 minutes or more. We might call that a conversion, just to start to get some information that Google can learn from, right? But that is going to be usually pretty easy to do. Those conversions are not going to be very costly. Getting a donation is probably a much more valuable conversion for your organization in terms of things that move the needle. But the flip side of that is going to be a harder person for Google to find. And usually the cost per click for that type of person is going to be a little bit higher because not only you, but also other organizations in a similar area are going to want those people to come to the site. So what that means is like your ad spend may go up, your clicks may go down, but your conversions may go up. And this is what I mean when I say that like all of these numbers are kind of important to have in the context of each other because you want to be looking at all of them as you're determining what is working and what's not working for your organization. Like in a perfect world, all four of these would go up every single month, but that's not going to be possible every single time. And in some cases, it might not even be desirable. So, for example, if you're getting really close to that $10,000 limit, you may not actually want your clicks to go up. You may want to focus much, much more on conversions, understanding that, your total clicks might go down, but you want to make sure that remaining money is really focused on that converting audience. So these are the four. If I had to pick one that I would prioritize above them all, it would be conversions because that, if you are being really intentional about your conversion strategy, is going to be the thing that moves the needle. It's basically the outcome that you are looking for from your ads. So that would be the one I would focus on the most. If I had to choose one that I would prioritize the least, it would be ad spend because ideally, if your conversions are coming along, your click through rate is high, you're getting good clicks, the ad spend is kind of irrelevant. I think a lot of organizations get stuck on like, why are we not spending that full $10,000? But there is, especially if you're a very, very local organization, sometimes your market is only X amount big. And so sometimes only spending $4,000 of that 10,000 limit, that might actually suit your goal and you may actually be hitting saturation in your market. It's very dependent on market size. So this is the one, especially since you're playing kind of with house money, that I would probably prioritize the least of these four. Conversions is probably the one that I would prioritize if I were in the nonprofit's shoes, looking at my ad grant results. All right. So I saw that there were a lot of questions coming in through the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some of these up and start to look at some of these. I think that Sharon already said that she will be sending out the slides. Um, and all right, so somebody asked a really good question. So Hamp asked, can an organization use multiple websites to advertise? The answer is yes, you can add multiple websites to your Google Ad Grant account. Couple of things you're going to want to be thinking about with that. So one is your nonprofit needs to own the second website. It doesn't necessarily need to have like the exact same like URL or even a similar URL in all honesty, but they do you do have to own it. So that's one important thing. So it can't be like, oh, we have a sister organization under a different nonprofit umbrella that we want to add to our Google Ad Grant account. That's going to be a no. The other thing you're going to want to think about, and I don't think this is like a non-starter. I think this is just important as you're thinking about your strategy. is that same $10,000 bucket of money is going to be split between both websites. So, what that means is you may want to be strategic about what ads you're running when, if you want to run ads to the second website at all. There are a few different things you might just want to be thinking about in relation to that. But as long as you are cool with sort of spreading out that full 10,000, a lot of the organizations we work with do that as a way to promote different programs. So, for example, we have an organization that we work with that has some programs in Kansas and Texas and then a couple other states. So they use it so that they can kind of hit all of those states. Another organization that we work with has like 3 or 4 different programs. They're all based in Memphis. This is the one I was talking about with the teacher applications. They have one about teaching. They have some about like civic advocacy and a few other things. They use it to promote their different programs that way. So yeah, those are important. I Seeing another question. I signed up for Google Ads and they recommend capitalizing each letter in the body text or in the body of the ad text rather than using standard capitalization rules. In your experience, does this matter? This is a really great question because this is something that I was a little uncomfortable with actually in the world of paid advertising. So I, prior to advertising, worked in SEO. In SEO, you're creating like on-site content that is written in a kind of normal, I would call it like newspaper adjacent fashion, right? Like how people are used to reading. And we work with some ad specialists who have done, it's called PPC sometimes, or like paid search for years, and they capitalize everything. The reason that folks do that, in my understanding, is that what happens when you are loading ad text into Google Ads is there's going to be like basically, I think it's up to 10, but it might be 15 different slots that you can add messages to. So it might be like if I go back on my slides here, just a second. All right, yeah, let's go to the one where it's bigger. Okay, great. So if I go back here, like this is one, and you can see we wrote this in normal sentence case, but sometimes our ads don't show up in normal sentence case. Sometimes we write them all in caps, but these different sentences are all like snippets that are added. And what Google does is mixes and matches these as a form of sort of A/B testing or like experimenting. So Google is basically going to combine and recombine all of these in order to make it the best like version of the ad possible and give you as the advertiser some understanding of like, okay, people maybe really liked this sentence, support Glacier National Park today by becoming a donor. Maybe they didn't care, or ads with your support helps us provide funding for vital projects and programs. Like maybe that one they didn't care as much about, so we will take that out. The reason to kind of capitalize everything is to make it a little more seamless when these things mix and match. Sometimes if you were to write like a little paragraph, it'll get a little chopped up and it'll sound a little weird. So I wouldn't call this like a make or break issue, but that I think is the reason why, at least that's my understanding of it. So the short answer is no, it doesn't matter much, but the longer answer is it's a pretty common convention in ads, in search ads especially. And I think it's because Google will mix and match, and you can't always perfectly predict how it's going to. So that's one way to do it. All right, let me see who else is in here. Oh, yeah. So David has a question that might be easier to explain vocally. We can definitely get to that, but let me look and see if there are any others that are easy. Okay. Nija asks, does redirecting to another website negatively impact Google Ads grant approval? So, for example, going from bvsmd.org to blackvegsociety.org. There are kind of two answers to this again. The short answer is it shouldn't. The longer answer is, in my experience, it is usually better to just apply for whatever that final destination is. So, like, if you've already applied for the Google Ad Grant, what I would recommend doing is just adding like Black Veg Society to your ad grant profile and just running your ads directly there. Um, the reason for that is that Google normally is pretty smart about understanding a redirect from one page to a new version of a page. Usually it's pretty good at picking up on those kinds of things. But I can tell you both from my experience in the organic side and in the experience to search or paid search side, it's not perfect. It leaves a little bit to be desired. So what you want to do is kind of minimize its possibilities for misunderstanding. Basically, the reason that Google sometimes reacts negatively to a redirect, and for those of you who may not be like up on a lot of techie terms. Redirect is basically when you type in one thing and then Google sends, or and then the web um, program like sends you to another page. Usually people just use it when they've updated their website. Google occasionally, its rule enforcement bot, it doesn't want people to run misleading ads. So like it doesn't want you to be like redcross.org and you click on the ad and then surprise, it's sending you to like some completely different website that has nothing to do with the Red Cross, right? It doesn't want you to do that. And so normally the bot that kind of enforces these types of things is pretty good at picking up on when it's a redirect to meaningfully the same page or meaningfully the same content, but it's not perfect. It sometimes is like, hey, I think you're trying to send my users somewhere that they didn't try to go. So that's why I recommend just using whatever that final URL is going to be. Usually just go ahead and use that in your ads. Usually just go ahead and use that with your applications and usually just go ahead and add that. If you already have the ad grant, especially, that's what I would recommend. But in theory, it should not be a problem. Is there a length or character maximum for an ad? Yes, there is. There are character requirements for each of these little parts of the ad. So the URL that's right here has a limitation, the headline, the ad text, and then the site links do. When you're filling this out in ads, it'll tell you what each of them are. Unfortunately, I don't have the character counts at the top of my head, but yes, they do exist. And so part of creating ads is sort of thinking of different creative ways to word things to make sure that you've got the character limits. But in the box that you fill it in, it'll show you what the character limit is and it'll tell you if you're going over. All right. Let's see. Will using dark mode on our landing pages affect or cause any problems? Not in my experience. That's a good question. That's one I've never been asked before, actually. I use dark mode on all of my browsing and all of my sites. I've never had issues with any of our clients' sites showing up. The only thing you might want to keep in mind if you're using dark mode, and I still don't really think this should be an issue, would be we we usually add images to our ads. You don't have perfect control in search ads over when images show up. It's basically when Google thinks that they're going to be more enticing. Usually that does mean something, but you might think about just how much contrast images would have on a dark mode background. So like in this example, we've got this bear here, like he might be a little hard to see on a dark mode background. Whereas like maybe if they had a picture of like a, I don't even know if snowy owls live in Glacier, but if they did, if they had like a big picture of a snowy owl, that might be kind of hard to see on like light mode, but it might show up a little better high contrast in dark mode. But that would be kind of the main thing. All right, let me take a quick browse at this other question. And David Borden, if you're still here, I'll read it, and then if we need to clarify anything, maybe if you're still here, you can come off mute, and we can talk about it. So we have a 501c3 that employs a writer for the great majority of the site's content, mainly a newsletter about drug policy reform. The site is stopthedrugwar.org and reform efforts. Because we report on what candidates for office do and say, as a legal precaution, we have the whole site under the ownership of our 501c4 partner nonprofit. As a single issue organization, such reporting risks being interpreted by the IRS as campaigning, regardless of how we present it. Does that cut off our prospects for being approved for Google Ads, or is there a way to work around that? That's a really good question. And I am pretty sure I understand what we're going for here. So we've basically got a situation where, we've got a 501c3, but because the sort of mission and because like the kind of actions of politicians are so heavily involved with the execution of this 501c3 mission, we've got a website that's owned by a 501c4. There is a there's a complexity with getting the Google Ad grant, and then I think with sensitive issues like this one or like prison reform might be another good example of a type of issue that can be a little sensitive. There may be some limitations here. My trying to think of kind of the best way to answer this. We have a similar type of client that we work with right now, and we're actually trying to work what the best strategies are. Google has some limitations on advertising about sensitive topics, so drug use can be one of them. We work with a few organizations that handle like addiction research, stuff like that, and usually there are some workarounds there. So I think for your organization, that probably wouldn't be a huge issue. But the other one is Google Ad grant accounts can't be used for political campaigning. So the answer would sort of boil down to whether Google saw your site primarily as a campaigning site or whether they primarily saw your site as a sort of informational 501c3 site. The thing that is challenging about these sort of edge cases is that Google enforces its policies through a robot that is kind of For me to be kind of dramatic, you can think of it a little bit like if the Terminator was just like walking through your town and kind of like looking for any sort of misdoing. It tends to, it's a hammer. It views a lot of things as a nail. And so it's not impossible in the sense that you can submit appeals if the sort of Google bot has wrongly identified content on your website as restricted when it shouldn't be, but it can sometimes be an uphill battle. So in terms of thinking through your situation, I actually think the 501c4 question is probably the less significant one in terms of the Google Ad Grant situation, because I actually think you could probably, if your 501c3 is in the percent database, you could probably get that approved relatively quickly. The question is whether you would be fighting an uphill battle with Google all the time about whether your content is allowed or not. So that might be something that would be a little bit challenging. Now, this is one, if you want, I can put my contact information up, but if you wanted to talk about this one in more depth, because I realize it might not be relevant to everyone who's on this call, this is an interesting puzzle that I have encountered similar, but not this exact situation before. There may be opportunities either with regular paid Google ads that may or may not be an option for your nonprofit, but I know that you know, election campaigns can run regular paid ads. They can have a regular Google Ads account. They just need to clarify like where their funding comes from. There's like a couple of extra hoops to jump through there. That might be an option. Or we could always take the sort of ask forgiveness after the fact approach, which I will sometimes do in ad accounts as well, which is if it is Google's money, it is free money that's on the table. It's worth submitting the application and seeing how it goes, especially if you have time and the uh, experiment is sort of worth engaging with for you. So I wish I could give you like a more exact answer there. That's a tricky question and a good one, but that would be my short answer there. All right. Any other questions? Because we do have a few more minutes if folks wanna put it in the chat. Feel free. Hang on for another maybe 2 minutes or so here. Or if anybody has a question and they're feeling brave and wants to come off mute, we could also have a normal conversation. All right. I'm not hearing anything, but my contact information is up on the screen right now. So maybe if you are watching the recording and you have a question, or if you think of a question later and you're like, oh, I wish I'd asked that, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat with you there. You can also send a email to sales@gettingattention.org. And our website, gettingattention.org, also has tons of resources. So if you're like, hey, this is interesting to me, I'd love to learn more, not ready to talk to a person yet, but I am interested in sort of step-by-step guides or things like that, that resource is also available to you there.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. On behalf of everybody, really appreciate your time and this was incredible, and the detail provided was fantastic. I made a bit of mistake and did not recognize Dr. Bronner's, and I apologize about that. So this workshop is a collaboration of the Hive at Leech Tag Commons with San Diego Gives and Dr. Bronner's. So my apologies for I know we have Dr. Bronner's grantees on this webinar, so you were in the right place all along. And there's always something that gets dropped off the intro, I guess. So just like Jessica said, and we'll share out the slides and the link to the recording. There'll also be a link for follow-up with Jessica on the follow-up note that we'll send if you'd like to schedule some time with her, as well, and a link to the evaluation if you didn't get to that. So thank you so much again, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Take care. Bye.